Welcome to another movie plot and enjoy the memories. It starts in the early hours of the morning with a farmer named Bane being chased through the forest by a vampire. It swiftly runs him down, but before it can finish drinking all of his blood, the sun suddenly rises, turning the vampire into a pile of ashes. Now allergic to sunlight and turning into a vampire himself, Bane attempts to take shelter in a nearby shed on his neighbor's property. It was once lived in by Stanley and his parents as one big happy family until his mother died of cancer and his father couldn't handle raising him alone. Now Stan lives with his abusive grandfather Ellis, who makes it known that he's the one making all the rules around the house. Leaving for school, Stanley almost gets run over on his bike by some bullies before nearly crashing into a police truck owned by Sheriff Dorney. She's patient with him, unlike her deputy, who says that maybe Stan needs some jail time due to his recent troublemaking behavior. At school, Stan sees his crush and former friend Roxy hanging out with the mean girls while his current friend Donna gets harassed by the bullies' ringleader Marble. Stan rushes over to help, but before a fight breaks out between them, a teacher intervenes, so the friends blow off class and go hang out on a moldy old couch. While talking, Donna begins to give Stanley grief for still having a crush on Roxy despite her cutting them off, which riles him up enough to go home. He sits in the attic thinking about her while tossing a knife into a target before getting bored and deciding to go walk his dog instead. He begins barking at the shed, so Stanley checks it out only to find a puddle of blood containing Bane's human teeth. He's now a full-fledged vampire ready to attack, but gets burnt by the sun again, allowing the terrified Stanley to escape. Thinking that it's just a squatting crackhead, Stan releases the dog into the shed but hears a sudden yelp before only the shepherd's head returns. Horrified, Stan runs to the house to find a weapon to deal with the problem when Ellis arrives home demanding to know where his dog is. Being told the truth, Pops goes out to confront the intruder, and upon seeing the severed dog's head, he goes inside to get his revenge. He doesn't listen to Stan's warnings, getting himself badly wounded by Bane, and despite Stan trying to save him, Ellis gets killed by the vampire. Thinking on his feet, Stan secures the shed with the dog's chain and boards up all of the escapes before going inside and getting stuck into Pop's beers. He doesn't want to call the sheriff as they'll believe he's the killer, so that night as he's sleeping, someone begins trying to get into his bedroom. Assuming that it's just his grandfather, Stan goes to check it out when a voice begins to beckon him from the shed. He approaches it in a trance-like state when a bang suddenly wakes him up in the bed, having just been experiencing a nightmare. He goes to school trying to figure out what he's going to do when he gets home, but Roxy decides to blow off her friends and catch up with Stan. She's also now Marble's side piece, which is one of the reasons why the pair of childhood friends stopped being as close as they once were. Dama doesn't help, as he's always giving Roxy a hard time for her poor choice of company whenever they try to reconnect. They all go their own ways, leaving Dama to fend for himself as he's chased home from school by the bullies and beaten up. Deciding that now's the time to go confront the vampire, Stan realizes he's in over his head when it attacks him and is only saved by the sunlight again. Unfortunately, Dama arrives angry that his friend left him to be beaten up, but first wants to know what destroyed his shed door. Not believing that there's a monster inside, he goes to check it out, almost getting eaten for the proof before helping Stan to patch the hole up with planks. The friend sees this as an opportunity to bring the bullies from school here and lock them inside with the vampire to take their revenge. He says it isn't murder on their part, but Stanley makes him promise to not do anything stupid and not to tell anyone about their secret. At night, after watching some movies to learn how to kill a vampire, Stan falls asleep and has a dream of a girl coming out of his poster. It's none other than Roxy, but when she hops into bed she turns into a vampire and Stan awakens from another nightmare. It's followed by another fake out which causes him to cut his face with the knife that he was sleeping with for protection. Meanwhile, the vampire's begun drinking his own blood out of desperation when Stan arrives armed with a power drill and begins putting holes in the shed. He tells the creature that it's dead today, but when returning to the house for a weapon, he's met by Sheriff Dorney, who's come searching for his grandfather. She also says that his neighbor Bane was out hunting foxes the other night when he didn't come home and his family's worried. Stan pretends like he doesn't know anything about that and that he needs to go to school, but Dorney offers to drive him and insists when he refuses. As he's grabbing his bag, she notices that Ellis's cane that he carries everywhere with him's on the floor, so she instantly becomes suspicious. She drops Stan off at school but decides to return to his house and have another look around for the missing man. Meanwhile, Roxy's showing more attention to Stan, so Marble mentions how she came around his place last night to sleep with him. After he makes a sloppy seconds joke, Stan's had enough and beats all of the ego out of him before being pulled off by a teacher. At the mention of the police returning to his home to have a word with his grandfather, Stan takes off running to stop Dorney while Marble staggers after him. The sheriff notices that Ellis's car is still there and thinks that he's trapped inside the shed when she begins hearing loud bangs coming from inside. Stan arrives in time, but the sheriff pulls her gun on the suspect and removes the final locks, allowing Bane to finally get something to eat as he drags Dorney inside, leaving only her arm behind. The bully arrives to begin beating on Stan despite having bigger problems to deal with and needs a pair of brass knuckles to do it. A gunshot rings out as Dahmer saves Stan but forces Marble to get inside the shed as punishment for all of the times he's tortured him over the years. His friend tries to stop him but he threatens him with the gun as well as he's finally had enough of all the bullying. As soon as Marble gets inside and closes the door, they hear the vampire feed on him, causing Stanley to get angry at Dahmer and they begin to argue. When he goes for the gun, Stan's friend pistol whips him unconscious, and when he wakes up he's met by Roxy and the shed door swinging wide open. She's horrified at the sight of the sheriff's arm and obviously has many questions, but before answering them Stan goes inside the shed to investigate. He sees what he thinks is Bane holding up Marble's corpse, but it's Dahmer who's now a vampire himself and says that Bane will return tonight to take his revenge. Roxy screams at the sight of the blood-covered Dahmer, who leaps on his friend, but Stan stakes him and burns him in the sunlight. Thinking that he's dead, Stan exits to reconnect with Roxy, but he missed the heart as the vampire exits into the sunlight, apologizing to his friend for the attack. By the time Stan tries to put him out with a sheet, it's too late and the sun's killed Dahmer, with his last words being "I'm sorry." The sun begins to set, so the pair begin making preparations for Bane's return by hiding the cars from the road and sealing off all the entrances to the house. They make stakes until it's dark, and when the two have probably their last kiss ever, they're interrupted by a banging on the door. It's Marble's two friends who've come looking for him, so Stan tries to convince them to leave for their own safety, but it's too late. One attempts to run away but gets pulled up onto the roof by Bane and has all of the blood squeezed out of him. The couple let the remaining friend Pitt inside, who's filled in on the situation and given weapons with a quick rundown on how to kill vampires. Bane cuts the power and the three survivors begin to hear him rummaging around upstairs, so they bravely go to check out the rooms. They split up for whatever reason, where Pitt finds the shutters open in a spare bedroom and comes face to face with his vampire friend. Roxy searches Stan's room and gets distracted by old pictures of them getting her captured by Bane and dragged into the attic. Stanley finds his grandfather's shotgun when he hears her scream and runs out of the room to be confronted by Marble's vampire friends. He locks himself back in his pop's room and frantically tries to load the gun up with bullets while the pair break through the door. It's loaded before they can make it inside, and with one pull of the trigger Stanley blows Pitt's head off while destroying the friend's heart. He then reaches Bane before he can turn Roxy as well, and the two fight in the attic with the vampire taking anything Stanley throws at him. Roxy even gets in on it, picking up the shotgun and shooting him right in the face, but Bane just takes it and keeps trying to bite them. Stanley talks like he's about to send the demon to hell with his very next move, but when he throws his knife at Bane he steps it, impaling Roxy in the shoulder. She's fine though, and after a back and forth of who's going to be the one to kill him, Roxy picks up the axe and while he's distracted trying to bite Stan, takes Bane's head off with a single swing. The victorious vampire hunters pile up all of the resulting corpses in the shed out back and set the place on fire. They hold hands while watching it burn down and sleep the whole day in Marble's car until just before sunset. A vampire's heard exiting the trunk, presumably Grandpa or the sheriff, or Marble's or Dahmer if either weren't finished off. And the movie ends.